Severine, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for having me. What a privilege.
Listen, I think the privilege actually is all mine because I'm so honored to interview you. You are doing and you've done so much to our sport. And, like you are a professional coach, you're a creative thinker, you wrote a book, okay? You are the U15 director of development and tours at Tennis Canada. And you also have an amazing podcast, which, by the way, I've listened all of it that I could possibly understand. That was in English. You have a French part as well. And which, by the way, if you guys are listening, like you should definitely tune in, subscribe, and, just it's great. Like if you're into development, coaching, leadership, like Sev's podcast is amazing. So, on your podcast, speaking about podcasts, like you always ask your guests, you always start, what is your story? What is your story? So now, like you said before the recording began, like the tables have turned. So what is your story, Sev?
Yeah, listen, thank you for the kind words. I've been doing this for years, and for me, again, what drives me is continuing to be surrounded like people like you, and having the drive and the passion to do better. We had amazing conversation. I'm sure today will not be an exception, but yeah, you're right. I'm like you. I'm doing those things to have a conversation, and today, yeah, the tables are turned, and it's my job to have a conversation and to start with my story. So my story is not that complex. I've been in sport. I've played tennis. I had a scholarship to go to the university when I was 17 years old. But when I was 16, I had an amazing coach that I still see today, that gave me a chance to go on a tennis court as a coach, and told me, Sev, I think you have the personality and the passion of the sport. And he was right. I was on court. I coached young kids, adults, and then I got the opportunity to go to the States Division One at 17 years old. And at the same time, I got the opportunity to be a tennis coach, and I chose that path, or that path chose me, because I'm 51 years old now, and I've been in my passion since. And that's how I started in coaching, and I started like all of the people that probably listens to you. Being in a club, working on juniors, adults, doing different things. And then I had the opportunity to work in wheelchair tennis. 10 years of my life, 3 Paralympics, 10 World Cup. And I have to say that was 10 amazing years, to connect with those athletes, to change the sport, because at the time it wasn't inclusive. It wasn't included in any federation. I think even Tennis Canada was the first federation to have wheelchair tennis included in the structure.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I got through wheelchair tennis in the opposite of my coaching development. My first tournament was the World Team Cup in Paris, and my second tournament as a coach was the Paralympic in Sydney in 2000. So it was very interesting to go through like high level of coaching like that, with those athletes, and you learn what resilience is, and you cannot have an ego when you're a coach, when you coach wheelchair athletes. Why? Because you cannot start a conversation by saying, oh, when I was a player I was doing that. You can't. And you really, really have to get that conversation going and that relationship, and because they're the one guiding you into what they can and can do. So that was 10 great years of my life, in my coaching life. And then I stayed with Tennis Canada, working with juniors, going into clubs, working with the coaches, and as you know, doing some travels also in between, and wrote 2 books, and doing different things that kind of, I'm passionate about. And that's pretty much the path that I've been through since that little 16 years old, asking to be on a tennis court as a coach.
Oh, awesome. So listen, you said 2 books. My bad. I said you wrote a book. So, because I know you wrote a book on
Oh,
sports, like on like prejudices, like in the like stereotypes in sports. What was the second one about? Just so
Yeah,
everybody knows as well.
yeah, thank you, Bogdan. It's been 10, 12 years, I think, already for the first one. Listen, the first one was really, it wasn't supposed to be a book. It was me writing things on paper, having parents knocking on my door, and seeing that there was a need to have a conversation and to help them. You know,
Yeah.
coaches, we have certification, we have things that we can rely on in regards of our education, but parents don't. And then I came up with that book, La Performance à quel prix, that it's in French right now, trying to translate it, that it's performance at which cost. Because as you know, Bogdan, and as parents perhaps that will listen to this, being a parent is not easy. The coaching is not easy, and trying to guide everyone into that path of development is a challenge. So that's the first book. And like you said, the second book is called Casser le Moule, Breaking the Mold. As a women coach, you go through amazing experience. You go through some challenges, unfortunately, because you're a female, and there are stereotypes that I myself had to go through into my pathway, and young girls also. So I wrote that's that second book. I think it was about 5 years ago. So two different topics.
Yeah, that's great. And like it's great that you mentioned both of them, because that's what one of the things that I wanted to really talk to you about is, since you started with your story, and like like you're a big proponent of bringing more girls in tennis, and like being a female coach and representing like female leaders like all over the world, so and trying to inspire younger girls. And when I listened to your podcast, a lot of times came up this phrase: if you cannot see it, you cannot be it, right? So I'm assuming, it was even worse when you were growing up, when you were just, climbing up the ladder. So how was it back then? Like for you
Yeah.
because I'm assuming it was incredibly tough. So can you share that experience?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Listen, it's very interesting because that it was either wheelchair tennis or juniors. I always coach more boys and men than girls and women. Is it because of my personality, the way and I do believe that in our coaching, you will attract players who cares about gender in regards of who you are,
Oh,
who
100%.
you are as a person, as you know, who you are in your energy, what are your values. So for me, that was very, very clear from the get-go in regards of my coaching. But I realized there was challenges more in the past few years than it was when I coached,
Really?
because I've never seen a difference. My colleagues always were the same way. I was the same way with them. Once I was coaching a young boy that is a coach now, and I remember him coming back after a tournament. He said, "Sev, why do people ask me why you're coaching me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "But they don't understand why I have a women's coach." And I'm a boy, and
Yeah.
he was, I think, at the time 12 years old. And I said, "What do you think? Do you think it's a problem? There's an issue?" He said, "No." But I said it was just interesting to have that question. So I think as you're going up, and you're as a coach, you're touching more the higher level. I feel that's where the challenges are, because they were not around me. And when I started going into clubs, you're saying something so important, and I think it's true for men and women. It's true for boys. Same thing for boys and girls. You need to see people that looks like you, to try to have a sense of where you can go. And I didn't realize that until I went into the clubs, and I had moms and dads coming to me and said, "Oh, this is refreshing, having a woman, being in charge, and going around the clubs. And my daughter's going to be so amazed to see that." And in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." But I had that a lot. And that's when I realized two things. I realized how important it was to be a model and to be someone that people can look up to. And I realized how important it was and how influence I had on those little girls and that development aspect of our sport. And it's a big challenge, because it's one thing to being someone that people look up to, and it's something else to ensure that you have the proper values and you're really showing something that
Yeah.
that makes sense to them. So there was a little bit of experience like that, but yeah, it is a challenge. It is a challenge to bring more young girls in the sport. I do think that we also need to make sure that when we talk about development or introducing kids to tennis, it's everyone, right? I do think to improve any status at a younger age, you need to have mixity. You need to have the boys with the girls. They
Yeah.
need to, to train with each other. But I think both sides, I think the boys, they need to be together. They need to yell and scream and wanted to win matches. And I think the girls need to do the same and to be in an environment where they can talk about the movie they watched the night before without getting yelled at,
That's right.
because they should be more focused or more intense, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like going to, understanding your athlete. I remember, I believe it was during my coach for certification, somebody brought up an example like from soccer, where like girls during the warm up they would talk a little bit, like just to like start kind of the practice. They would like exchange like, hey, how was your day, like, and just like normal conversation, and that was okay, because that's what gets them started. And just acknowledging that, like knowing your athletes, and understanding, okay, that's for that environment, that's perfect. And that was a high level team, it's not like you're like once a week type. That was like I believe, I don't want to say like which team it was, but it was a very high level team. But let's talk a little bit more about like what can we do, specifically in Canada, because that's where we are, and what can we do better as coaches in our clubs, and what can we do better from maybe parents, and what can we do better as perhaps federation, in the future, to attract more female players, like starting from a very young age, keeping them in sport, and making sure that we have successful female leaders in the future.
How long do we have?
Oh, we have all the time in the world.
Listen, first of all, as I said a bit earlier, I do believe in mixity. I do believe that it is important at a young age to have boys and girls together. I believe it's important socially. I think it's important to understand the working together with the differences. Sometimes I see programs, for young girls, very, very young. And I'm like, okay, the concept is cool because you want to keep them, you want to track them. But I'm saying to myself, but it's the same thing for little boys. Little boys want to have fun. Little boys want to be in an environment that it's safe, that it's fun, that they can play, they can train, they can play points, and it's for both. And I find sometimes because we're so focused on getting those little girls in, we get into those kind of stereotypes. Oh, let's put the girls together because they don't like to compete. They don't like the stress of competition. I totally disagree on that. The girls, they love to compete. They love the competition. It's the environment around that is a challenge, right?
Yeah.
For them, it's about playing, competing. It's not about the end result as much as what the boys would like. The boys, they don't care about the skills, and when they're young, they just want to compete and fight and win the tournament. And both is good. So for me, it's important to be careful on that, and mostly at a young age. But I do think, and that will be a recommendation for clubs, I do think that they also need their space. I think boys need to be boys, and I think girls need to be girls. And it's funny because I had an experience when I was with a coach, and the girls, it was six girls on a court, and I was coming in, and first thing, hey Sev, how are you? Having a conversation, chatting. And right away the coach comes in And it's like, okay, girls, what are you doing? Do you think we're here not to be serious? Stop talking and go on the court. And I was like, no, no, that's the mistake. The mistake is also seeing all of this as being negative, having a conversation, and that's why girls drop off, to be honest.
Yeah.
And boys, because the environment that we create is not cool, is not for them, and it doesn't mean that you cannot be rigorous, you cannot be tough, because that's what everyone wants. So I do think we need to continue the mixity at a young age. I do think that they need their own space. So create sometimes a once a week or a once a month girls only program, boys only program. The other thing is give the opportunity to female coaches to be a part of it. There's too many times that we say, and again, I hear it also today. Oh, girls, you're so good with young kids. Like that's all we can do.
Yeah.
And there, you know what? At the end of the day, going around the clubs, I see men that are amazing with young kids, amazing. So we need to move away from that stereotype that women coaches are good with little kids and men are just good with you know tough boys and starting
Yeah.
15,
That's
16
right.
years old. So I would move away from that, but again, I would give the opportunity to boys to coach girls and to women to coach boys, because I think sometimes we put the women coach with the girls,
Yeah.
but we don't give them the opportunity to be with the boys. So I think there needs to be some movement on that. And in regards of coaching, I think we need to have a proper conversation between ourselves, and just to say, okay, there is a difference between the boys and the girls. How we can make a difference to make sure that we adapt the way we communicate and our conversation with both, because that's all
Yeah.
it is, right?
Yeah, I think this conversation has to start. Sorry to interrupt, because I think part of the problem is that people confuse those differences, those natural differences. And again, it's like has to go a little bit more individual, player by player, but people confuse those differences with some of the stereotypical things, they put on boys or the girls. So like you said, like, okay, for boys, they don't care how, they want the outcome, right? And the girls, they're slightly different. So that's like something that you would pick up by working a lot with both. But saying like, girls are not good at the net or something like this, it's more like stereotype. That it's a more like a limitation label that's not getting us anywhere. So I think those conversations need to start a little bit more often, just
Yeah,
for everybody, just to understand. And like I know, I for sure, many people like say these things without even understanding how detrimentally they can be for the game and for that player they're working with, right?
yeah. Now
So
listen, you bring such a good point, and the best example is, oh, girls are so bad at the net, right?
yeah.
But how many times coaches are having young girls at the net and work on their game? So you're right. Sometimes we block away things because we put everyone in a box. The girls on one side, the boys on one side, and we don't move them away from there. So, and the other thing is, as coaches, it's not just about hearing about the differences. Is we need to give ourselves tools to do a better job, and sometimes I think that's where the conversation is not going. And I'm again an easy example. I was on court last week with a group of young girls, 12 years old, 13 years old, and I look at one player and I'm like, oh my God, she to the other coach, and she changed as she grew. She's like, oh my God, yeah. She's starting to have knees problem. And right away, I go to him. I said, oh, did she just, started her period? And the coach turned red and he's like, yes. And then he turned to me and said, is there a connection with this? And I'm like, yes, there is. So we're afraid to have the conversation, but it needs to happen because
Yeah.
for him, it was right away something that, oh my God, thank you, Seb. This is helping me so much. So it's not his fault that there's no conversation around it. It's a
Yeah.
bit our fault that we don't have a conversation around it. So I do think that we need to have more education, more conversation, more inclusion. Women with boys, and men's coaches with girls, but with having their space. And as a federation, I think we need to continue to break the barriers on court, break the barriers for coaches. It's one thing to say that we want more female in the field, but if we don't show that we have the opportunity to do more than just being with young kids, what do you think is going to happen? To your point earlier, the young players that perhaps will want to transition to coaching will say, oh, okay, so I'm blocked until they're 8, 9, 10 years old. And then when it's time to go higher, if it's very tough to do. So we
Yeah.
need to open those doors. And again, I think clubs, provincial association, federation are making a lot of effort. I think the effort are there. It's starting to change, but not
Yeah.
fast enough.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to take time for sure. But I think, like also like thinking about opportunities that we create for not just female coaches, but for any coaches, but for female coaches in particular. You look at, let's say, a young girl that came out of university, she wants to start working as a coach, for example. Like, what are the jobs that offer any, like benefits? Everything is contract based, like, so instantly, like, it's a choice. Do I want to have a good benefit package, like just to protect my health, to just make sure that I'm protected at my workplace, or do I go work contract by hour, nothing is stable, so I think, yes, some of it is part of the job, but some of it doesn't have to be part of the job. We can create maybe a more secure place, make it more competitive, not just from club to club, but just to keep more people in tennis, in coaching, as opposed to just going to the office and, like getting sometimes, more money right away, but having like some benefits with it. So it just, like, again, like, just a thought.
Yeah, no, listen, again, it's so important, Bogdan, what you're mentioning, because that is the challenge of being a coach.
Yeah.
Forget the gender, put this on the
Yeah.
side.
That's right.
Sometimes I'm looking at even myself, I'm like, wow, I've been in the business for 35 years, 33 years, and I'm like, am I crazy? Because it's hours, it's travels, it's insecurity, like you mentioned, it's going from contracts for some coaches, contract to contract. And I have to say, this is for a lot of sports. And as
Yeah.
you go in Europe, and I remember being around coaches that they were paid like teachers. They were part
Yeah.
of the system.
Yeah.
And I know it's a conversation that a lot of people in Canada anyway are having, because of all the challenges and issues that you hear and that you see with coaching and with athletes and with a lot of things around that. But at the end of the day, you're right. You need to professionalize our work. What we do is our work. It's full time. It's
Yeah.
bringing challenges to it. But I agree. It's another conversation where do we bring our profession, and I think we're ready to have that conversation.
Yeah. So let's shift our focus a little bit from coaches to parents, which is another favorite topic of ours. And again, like, having like worked with the club, with the private sector a little bit, and encountering even more parents, than when I was working for Tennis Canada, made me realize that there is no education. Like some parents, most of them, like really like 95%, I would say, come with pretty much zero knowledge about, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine, by the way. I don't expect them to have that, but even like when they go like from place to place to place to academy, they still have minimum understanding of what is like minimum guidance. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think parent education is also like it's very personally it's a very big passion of mine as well. Like I do some seminars. I know you do like even more, and you've done it for years and years, and that's why I really want to ask you, like, what are the important, I guess and it's hard to identify just a few, but for you personally, what are the most important things as a tennis parent? What are the things that you want to adhere to? Like your first book, yeah, going back to it, was about like performance at what cost. So like where do we draw the line as parents? And of course everybody has to decide for themselves, but as coaches, like what do we, I guess, want to tolerate, and what is the line? Like at what cost? Let's answer that question.
Yeah, listen, huge question.
Yeah.
I remember when I did the first book, one thing and again, I didn't reinvent the wheel there, but I called it a triangle of success, right? You have the parents, you have the coach, you have the athlete in the middle, you have the word success. People sometimes they are even saying, "Oh, why are you doing that? It's pressure." Listen, we're playing a sport. There's a winner, there's a loser. That's also life. We have to stop moving away from it, and we have to stop trying to protect kids from defeat, from losing. We have to give them tools to how to deal with it, because that's our sport. You will have kids that will finish a year with more defeat than wins. And sometimes that's what happens. You develop yourself, you're going to lose more than you're going to win. So I have a feeling, and that did not change. I think it's even getting worse, that parents sometimes have a perception and a false perception that if they're able to control everything around their kid, that it will prevent them to cry, to not be happy, or to not lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake. It's a mistake at any age, because life, it's about that. It's about winning and losing. It's about, going to a tournament, coming back, and you have a bad day. That expression, that expression, bad day at the office. For them, it shouldn't be work. It's sport. They don't train
Yeah.
tennis, they play tennis. So I would say from the book, a lot of people at that time when I wrote it, we're talking about, parents trying to, put their reflection of what they didn't have when they were young to their child. I think we're past that, to be honest. I think parents are in the business of tennis, and that's why I'm using the word business, because our sport is very expensive. So if I'm a parent and I'm spending money on my child, you have some that will do it really out of the feeling of giving them tools, giving them an opportunity. What I'm saying to parents is, listen, if you look at me, I'm in tennis since I'm 17 years old. So what you're telling me as a coach, because I became a coach and not a player, it's like I failed. How can I be saying that I failed when I'm doing something that I love, that I'm passionate about for the past 30 years? So that's the other thing that parents need to change. It's not one way. It's not you get to being a champion or that's it.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you're failing. So I do think that aspect has changed a lot. So for parents, is coming back to the base. And like I said to them, I said, listen, I remember saying multiple years ago, and every book that you read and I read were saying that it takes a minimum of 10 years to build an athlete. But you know what? It takes 10 years to build a good parent. It's not something that comes automatically. So I think when we talk about parents, we also need to talk about coaches. I think
Yeah.
we need, as coaches, to be more, having more tool to deal with parents, to tell them what to say, how to be, what is a proper
Yeah.
behavior, what are the values around sport and development, and at 15, 16, more high performance.
Yeah.
What is autonomy? Parents sometimes don't understand, and that's tough for us, for coaches, to tell them, listen, If I'm doing this today when your child is 8, 9, 10 years old, it's because I anticipate that that's going to help him or her at 15, 16 years old, right?
Yeah.
So it's not it's not easy for them. We need to be a resource for them in regards of guiding. You said it, the word. We need to guide them. At the
Yeah.
same time, we also need to accept that some parents don't want guidance. Why? Because they have a clear path and picture into what they want their child to be. The other thing I would say to parents, stop comparing, you know? When I hear, oh, Layla did that when she was young with her dad, and
Oh
Bianca
yeah.
did this, and Felix did that. And I'm always saying to them, do you really know, one, the cost of it? And do you know how many parents try to copy this and failed? So, that comparison is taking away the identity of their child. Also,
Yeah.
you talked about it in the beginning. We as coaches, the strength of a good coach is to individualize coaching, even in a group environment, right? We had that discussion, you and I, on that. But it's the same thing for parents. They need to stop imposing how to be, how to play, how to react, how to behave that is not who they are as children. So there's a lot to do in that. And to be honest, we also need to guide them in a pathway that is long. How you're
Yes.
going to be at 8, 9 years old as a parent is very different at 10, 12, is very different at 15, 16. But the parent will always be there. And I do think it's important that parents are there. I think
Oh, 100%.
the challenge is more how they behave. What is their role in the pathway of this? But I do think to have better parents, we need to have better coaches, and we need to have both being more educated and
Yeah.
informed, perhaps, on the tools to do our job a bit better. So yeah, and the last thing I would say to parents, don't see don't see what you give your child strictly based on investing and thinking that winning is a return on your investment. Don't make that mistake. You
Yeah.
know, understand that what you're giving your child is confidence, is character, is autonomy, experience. You and I had the opportunity to be with you on a tour. It wasn't the easiest tour. Remember, it was not easy, and I'm sure that the kids that were on that tour with us will laugh when I'm saying that. But
Yeah.
oh my God, the learning, even for me as a coach after 30 years, the opportunity to be around those amazing kids, what
Yeah.
those kids learn from that tour, this is like, it's worth. So what the parents did by trusting us as coaches, but sending their kids to that event, they gave them like life experience that they cannot buy. And
Yeah.
that's where they should focus on those experiences. And at the end of the day, and you heard me saying that it's not popular to say that when you're in a coach that develops players. At the end of the day, they need to be better people,
Yeah.
much more than just being better athletes.
100%. 100%. And I'm so happy you brought all of those things, because to me, like, the biggest takeaway from what you just said, and I'm just trying to sum it up, is just basically having, whether it's a coach, whether it's a parent, is to having a vision for the future, okay, and asking yourself, how do I want my son, my daughter, my player, doesn't matter, myself, how do I want that person to be in 10, 15 years, for example? And knowing that will help you understand, so what are the priorities for now? And I think that a lot of times, from my personal experience, parents would really benefit if they were starting to think about values first, because you mentioned it's important to have that we develop people, because in the at the end of the day, there is life after tennis. Okay, whether you become professional and retire at like 35, 40, whatever you retire, whether you play college and then do something else, there's going to be something that you will be doing. You're still a person off tennis court. You're still a girlfriend, boyfriend. You're still going to be a mother, a father, and your mindset, your like psychological traumas from your court or successes will carry with you for the rest of your life. So that's why I think it's more important that we structure everything around values, and that's how we ensure that we develop good people and healthy people. That's important because we're dealing with kids, and I think to me that's the most important thing, and I think that's what basically I took away from your answer.
Yeah, and again, you're bringing a good point. And I remember when I was involved in certification and coaching the coaches, as we say, it's something that I totally believe in, and it's a value of mine for sure, of the give back, right? And it's funny because we don't sometimes understand the impact that we have on kids, that it's
Yeah.
either positive or negative. I hope coaches that are listening to your podcast understand the impact we can have. And sometimes I remember when I was doing certification, the first question, why are you here? Why do you want to become a teacher, a coach? And you have half of them going, you know what? I want to make sure I'm going to giving the kids what I didn't have, because the coaches that surrounded me were so bad. And then you have somebody else that would say, you know what? I just saw my coach going, he was amazing or she was amazing. And I just want to do what they do. And I want to give back because that's what they did to me. So again, I had a conversation with some coaches on that, and it's okay that coaches are not seeing it like that, because some coaches, and this, they don't care. They don't care what the kids will say about them in 10 years. And that's okay. But at the end of the day, what I'm surrounded by for the past 30 years, when I see an athlete, when I see a player, when I even have conversation with Felix, it's not about what we change on his forehand or what we change on their serve. It's like, do you remember that story? Do you remember that when we were in with Vicky Momboko, she talks to me about Guadeloupe again, with the chicken
Yes.
and with the walk we had in the forest. She didn't talk to me about the matches. So for me,
No.
and again, for me as a coach, that's what continued to drive me. But again, I
Yeah.
realize more and more the impact that we have on those kids.
Yeah, through those experiences, in our conversations. And the interesting thing that you never know what will impact them.
Yeah.
Like you may think it's this, but they'll, like, you ask them 5 years from now, and then they're going to tell you completely, you're like, what? I said that?
Yeah.
And that's what's stuck. So I always find that funny. But, you mentioned values and, you know, parents and coaches working together and making sure we develop good people. And that's where it's a little bit tricky conversation we're about to enter, but it's important that we talk about it. And that is, competitive structure, and that's more to relate to your position at Tennis Canada, your U15 development and tours. Kids, like, parents want their kids to get in, to get in the system. They realize the value of it. They want to be part of it. How do you, maybe we can start by you talking about what's the process. How does a kid get noticed from, like, from, I don't know, as young as possible? How does one like Sev or somebody else from Tennis Canada say, hey, like, there is this good 8-year-old, in Burlington or in Quebec?
Yeah, listen, it's there's a lot of things that you just said. Being part of the system for parents is important, but I think it's important because I would say in time, Tennis Canada was able to to kind of build a brand. You know, everyone, when I remember, back to Jill Inderington, back to, players Sébastien Larreau, Fred Niemeyer, Helen Kelly. We had players, and we were kind of, okay, they're good. It's okay. But then we had more players, the Bassett Seguso, and then Jeannie Bouchard, Peliveau, and then Vashek, and all those names. And
Yeah.
people kind of saw that it wasn't just out of nowhere anymore. It was about there was something that was created that players, first of all, wanted to play tennis, and second of all, wanted to be part of being in the system as a Canadian player. So that I think is a positive thing. The challenge with that comes with at which cost, right? Because sometimes we are making, as parents, when I talk to parents, there's some decisions that are done because you want to be part of the system. But sometimes it's not
Yes.
really the decision you need to do for your child. And I understand the parents is really, really difficult because it's a catch 22, when you're part of the federation. For us, the big value is giving back. Yes, the tournaments are making money. Yes, it's coming back to the federation. But we want to do with that is giving back. Is when a kid travel, it doesn't cost a lot. When you're in a regional center, you could have some training that you don't pay for. So it's really something that facts, and I'm saying that in tennis, but I had conversation with soccer, with hockey. It's the same thing for every sport, and honestly, all over the world. So the aspect of the private sector, the national federation, it is like that around the world into the kind of aspect of attractability to go to a federation. Now, when we each have at Tennis Canada a role, and the perspective of that role, and I'm going to take mine, is being the eyes of everyone, is trying to look at young players, at kids at any age below 15, 15 and down, and trying to see and look at those kids, and as much as possible to see it around the country, not to stick to one province. For example, I'm leaving Friday to the west. So I want to see those kids from Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. Then we saw some kids in Saskatchewan. And so our job is really to be everywhere as much as we can to look at those players. Now you can say, okay, Sev, that's great, but what are you looking at? Okay. And
Exactly.
what we're looking at is everything that all the coaches are doing in their environment, because we do need to understand that without clubs, without coaches, without families having kids in tennis, you have no Tennis Canada, right? Your success
Yeah.
is my success. So I think it is important to have that working together philosophy and value. And for me, that's how I'm trying to do it, is to share it, to see the kids in their own environment. And to be honest, talking to a lot of friends around the world, not a lot of federation are doing that, going in their own environment of the kids. And it's trying again to make a judgment. And we call that the coaching eye. Coaching eye is upon our experience. It's upon the LTAD, that is a technical reference for us. As coaches, we all know that there's some competencies that we want to see, right? About physical, technical, tactical, mental. Do we have competitors? Are kids crying all the
Yeah.
time? Do we see kids that are going and getting, struggling to get to all the balls? So we have kids that are more passive. So we do a judgment call around those things and say, okay, there's a few kids that, seems to be not too bad. Again, what is important to understand is at a younger age, it's about that profile. It's about that sense of coaching eye, what we're looking at, because it evolves and it changes. And when you get into the 12, 13, 14 years old, you kind of continue to go into profile, but then you cannot get away from results, because results, as it's what will give you opportunities to go to those higher tournaments. I'm not going to say to a kid
Yeah.
that is 15 years old, or let's say 17 years old. That's about, girls is 15, boys is 17. That's the average age to go to major junior events in all the Grand Slams. So I'm not going to say to someone that is 16-year-old, oh, you have the profile. If I would be me, you would go to the Roland Garros junior. No, what's going to dictate that this kid's going to go? It's a result. But that's at
Yeah.
15,
Ranking.
16, 17. That's not at 8 years old. So you talked about it earlier. You need a vision. And one thing that we forget that is so important, you need a plan. You don't, development do not come out of nowhere. Development comes because you have a structure, because you have a plan. Again, the plan is just a roadmap. The plan is not something that you have to A plus B plus C equal D. No, it's just guiding you. And going back to what you were saying, sometimes I'm afraid, because I look at tournaments and the amount of matches or tournaments that kids are doing, it's overwhelming, or the amount of hours on court. But I think everyone is kind of afraid that if they don't do as much as the next person, they're not going to be selected. They're not going to go to tours. They're not going to be number one in
Yeah.
Canada. So I would say this is a challenge for our sport. Whoever you are, wherever you're from a federation, from a private club, from a provincial association, it is the main challenge for all of us.
Okay. Thank you for that broad answer. Just to elaborate a little bit for those parents and coaches who are listening, that let's say they're like, oh, what, Sev visits clubs, and like, so she never came to my club. So how do they organize that visit, and is there something that a coach should do, like that the higher management in the club should do? Because I'm sure there are parents like that really would want to know that Coach Sev, visited their club, but they never had it.
Yeah, listen, it's part of the structure, and right now you have Jocelyn Robichaud that is really in charge of everything development U15. So I would say to those coaches, reach out, because if they're listening, they're saying, yeah, Sev, yeah, for sure, you can't do all of it, or anyone at Tennis Canada can do all the clubs. They would be right. But I think, it's for the coaches to say, I think I have kids in my programs that are not bad, and reach out. Sometimes we think it's a one-way street. No, we're here as a team. We're here to work together. And that's what everyone needs to understand. And to do that is really about the conversation. So I know that from my end, there's some places that I went to because coaches reached out. So that's what I would say to everyone. I would say, don't be afraid. Look up on the Tennis Canada website, see if there's anyone, and trying to reach out. Now, if you're a parent and you're starting to say, oh, hi, my kid is this and that, we always go through the coaches. We always go through the structure,
Yeah.
and that will not change.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the way it should be, because again, through the coach, you can see, like tens, kids, and you're not gonna it makes just more sense. I get it. Just talking about the structure just a little bit more. Again, like, that's how I know when I'm talking to you, you have such like perfect vision and great, like your values are in such place that, we also talked about having a vision and making sure that you develop your child with certain set of values that you want to be attached to the kid. So when kids are starting to compete, and you can see that like at really like U12 level, and results are becoming like so important for mostly for parents, and that's what they translate to their kid, because again, we're not going to be selected for the tours. You better win. You want to get to the regional training center, so you better do this, you better. And that pressure is like every day, it adds up. Can you maybe say a couple words for parents who, and again, it's not their fault. They want to do, like, I always believe that parents want to do the best they can for the kids. They always have the best intention, but like we talked earlier, it's about us guiding them and kind of saying, hey, like, that's fine if he doesn't make it, or he doesn't, let's say, win at U12. So can you maybe say a few words for parents who are really concerned about results, especially at a younger age?
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, I go back to the plan. I go back to having a conversation. The best person to guide those parents are us coaches. The unfortunately, when you're a parent, you're emotionally attached. So you're emotionally attached to that win. You're emotionally attached to that loss. And sometimes we, like I said earlier, parents identify their own success if their kid wins, right? Talking to some
Yeah.
parents, they have a perception that if my kid wins, woof, I'm a parent, I'm good. I've done the right thing. I took the good choices. And it's not it's not your win, it's not your loss, it's your child. He's or she's the one that is on court that probably will be happy or cry at the end of the day. What I would say is, don't let the result dictate your decisions, number one. Number two, when I say we, it's in our sport in general around the world. We need to work on behavior. We need to work on behavior because kids are so anxious about playing a match, and in the match anticipating saying to their parents they lost, anticipating the reaction, anticipating the ride, in the car back home, and getting yelled at, and why did you lose, you didn't give 100. So the behavior needs to be addressed as parents and as coaches to the child at a younger age, much earlier than it is about the results. And the other thing I would say to parents, educate your child not to prevent them from losing, to have the proper behavior and understanding that if they lose, here's how to be, and here's you as parent, how you can react. And I'm going to give you a story that I gave a few times. I remember a few years ago, I was in a tournament, and there's a kid that was playing at the back of the court, and he was, the expression we use as coaches, tanking his match. You could see
Yep.
that he didn't want to be there. You can see that, like, he didn't do everything to go through the challenge. He just dropped the ball on that match. He comes around, he sees his mom, and he said, Mom, the kids are not stupid, they're smart kids. And he's like, I gave my best, and I thought I played well, and I did the right thing that the coaches asked me, everything to try to kind of going smoothly on the mom reaction. And the mom reaction was amazing. She said, listen, no, you didn't play well. No, you didn't give 100%. And no, you didn't do what your coaches wanted to do. But at the end of the day, I still love you. And for me, that says it all. You still need to be honest. I think honest is a value of mine, and a value of a lot of parents. It's okay to be honest with your child. It's okay to tell them, no, your behavior was not great. But at the end of the day, it's okay. So I think sometimes we go to the extreme. We either are in their faces and we're angry
Yeah.
and mad as coaches or as parents, or we say we want to be so positive that we're, I don't know, it's okay next time. So try to find kind of a balance on that honesty of that behavior, because that's a role of parent. Anything else is the coach, right? Is the honesty of the coach. And then parents will say, yeah, but the coaches are not always there. Perfect. As I always said to parents, I'm so fortunate to have you on a tournament because you're my eyes. You're the one that's going to give you feedback if I'm not there. So it's a team effort. It's not the parents on one
Yeah.
side and the kids on the other side. And the other thing I would say finally to the parents is make sure that you have the proper volume of training, tournament, and matches. We sometimes think about tournaments. Oh, my son or my daughter played 10 events this year. Yeah, but they lost every single time. So it's 10 tournaments. So it's 10 matches. And others will say, oh, I won 10 tournaments. I won them all. So that's 40 matches, right? So it is important to talk about matches because that's different. Even as a coach,
Yeah.
if I have my kid that I coach comes back in my club on Monday after winning the finals on Sunday night, I don't want that kid in my club on Monday. But if they lost on
Yeah.
Friday, I do want my kid in the club. So I would say to parents to be careful on that volume and to coaches. And finally, again, stop playing always to go higher because and mostly at a young age. You know, a 10-year-old body is a 10-year-old body. And sometimes when you put those kids under 14, under 16, and then I hear, yeah, but it gives them more chances to play matches and this and that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because they
Yeah.
still have a 10-year-old body. So that's what I would say about the competitive aspect of the development of the child.
No, I think it's great. I think it covers so many questions that might have followed, but that's great. Sev, we're approaching the end of our show, and I just want to finish with some questions that I had from the audience, from the Instagram. So if you guys are listening and you want to ask some questions to my future guests, please follow me on Instagram. Follow Sev on Instagram because she posts also some good stuff there. And you can ask questions if you check my stories. So first question is from a parent. It's important to mention that. Hi, Coach Severine. May I ask how to help players how to help my daughter to deal with the pressure during the match?
Such a great question. And I do think the pressure during the match, it's for me, is having a conversation before the match. I feel it, and I don't know why, a lot on with young girls, there's the ones that are perfectionist are the one that has difficulty to deal with the score, with the anticipation of results. So for me, it's really having a conversation about, again, the behavior, the consequences of winning and losing. You know, for them to try to minimize what the match represent, but at the same time it is important to continue to nourish the competitiveness of those players. And again, I don't know if it works. I've tried it on some of those young players, young girls. Is continue to talk about losing and defeat, and not putting this away. And again, a quick story. I remember coaching a young girl, and the parents were giving her a massage once a week, physical training twice a week, psychologist, mental training once a week, coaching 5 times a week, match play with a partner. And when I talked to the parents, for them, it was about trying as much as they can to give that child the best tools possible for her to succeed in her own time. And I remember her coming to me and saying, Sev, my parents are giving me a massage, a mental trainer, a physical trainer. How can I lose? How can
Yeah.
I lose if they give me all those opportunities? So sometimes parents really don't want to do the right thing. But by trying to do the right thing, it overwhelms their child. So what I
Yeah.
would recommend that parent is have a conversation. Don't be afraid to have a discussion and to try to tell them, you know, why are you reacting like that? Anything we can help, anything that you can do differently. And
Yeah.
sometimes you know, having a positive conversation for them, trying to have a keyword every single time it happens seems to kind of refocus them to being more positive about themselves, walking differently on court, being more confident. So that's what I would say to that parent.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think it's important that we have conversation about objectives. Like what is it? Like if you go into your match, I always say like to anybody, to a player, to coaches, to parents, like if you go into a match with no task, you cannot fail. There's how can you be upset with somebody that you didn't have like set expectations for the match, and then the player comes out, they lost, and then we get upset. But you're not allowed, like you're not allowed to get upset if you have a certain task measurable that a player can control, and they come out of the match. Okay, then we can talk. But until then, like until you have those things that you mentioned, like we have to have talk before the match, like talk about what happens, like if you lose. I think it's important we talk about those things. So
Yeah, I agree.
that was great. Thank you so much. And another question is, it's more like a follow up question because we answered part of it earlier in the podcast. But our age, OTA wins, or level of play factors in getting attention from Tennis Canada. Like at like the girl, I know the parent. The girl right now is 8, and I'm assuming they're thinking, like going forward,
Yeah,
like
great
U10,
question.
U12.
I think, listen, as I said earlier, what is very important to understand in any sport, but I'm going to talk about our sport, tennis, at a young age, it's all about the kid, the physical profile, their behavior, their we talked about that this week, the way they are on court. Are they a good competitor? And everyone needs to understand at a younger age, results has nothing to do into the reflection of saying, oh, they're good or they're not good. That has nothing to do with that coaching eye at a younger age.
Yeah, no, that's great, fantastic. Next question is from a fitness coach. At what age can you in quotes tell if a player has what it takes? Is there a cutoff?
Again, at a young age, I don't think there's a cutoff. You can't say that. Kids are developing so quick. Their maturity for boys, for girls are different. They mature at a different age. And the best example for this podcast is Diallo. Gabriel Diallo, the kid is what now, 6'7"? He was tall
Yeah,
at 15, he was tall at 10, but imagine the lack of coordination skills that this kid had when he was younger. So imagine anyone that believe in this kid and giving them tools saying, oh my God, you're so tall, you can't run, you can move, forget it, it's done. So you can't do that.
yeah,
I think that the physical coaches have probably more eyes and more understanding of what is good and what needs to be worked on. But that's the thing. At a young age, the kids can't be in a box. Do you see kids that are more coordinated than others? Yes. Do you see kids that are faster than others? Yes. But does it mean that they're going to keep those abilities when they're going to be 12, 13, 14? I don't know. So I myself and anyone can't be in a position to say, oh, this kid will succeed, this kid will not succeed. But in all
yeah,
honesty, if you ask me the question, when I saw Leila Fernandez, did I see something in that kid? For sure. When you saw Felix at 7, did we see something in this kid? For sure. It's like the gut, the feel, the experience going, there's something there. Can I explain it? Can I put it on paper? No. And it's more feel, right? It's not saying, oh, this guy is going to be top 10 in the world winning a Grand Slam in the next 10 years. You can't do that. I don't think it's fair for us as coaches, for parents, or any kids.
yeah. Funny story about DLO, because I had a chance. It was my second tour. It was actually my first tour with Tennis Canada. I traveled with Fred Niemeyer,
Yeah.
and Gab Diallo was on the tour. We had the Panama, Nicaragua ITFs. And Gab Diallo, I'm 5'8". He wasn't much taller than me at that time, maybe like 5'9" or something. And he lost his first round in like G4. Back then it was G4, not J4, but G4 to a guy who played tennis for 3 years. He was overweight, a son of a local like millionaire in Nicaragua. You know, they put him in because so Gab Diallo losing to that guy, and I have a video like of one point him losing a set. I'm not gonna share it, you know, like but and then yet, you know, years later, he's on the Davis Cup team. He's playing, you know, all these tournaments. So that was him 14 turning 15. So, you know, talking about results not mattering and all that stuff. So even at that age, you know, you cannot define yourself by results, and you don't know how you're going to grow. You don't know how many
No,
skills you're going to keep, you know, what. Yeah. So, and it's like, this story is like just a confirmation of
yeah,
what we just pretty
it's
much
great
talked
to hear.
about.
But again, to conclude on the physical aspect, I do think that our
Yeah.
young players 10 and under, they need to be better on the basic of any active life, throwing, kicking, catching. They need to be, better on all of this at a younger age. Sometimes we put that aside. I hear a lot,
Yeah.
you know what, I don't like my kid to do physical, activities and to do coordination skills because we're losing time on a tennis court. At 15, 16, I would understand, but at 8, 9, 10 years old, we need to do this. We need to do more. We need to understand
Yeah.
that 30 minutes on coordination skills is 2 hours of gaining stuff technically in tennis. So that's what I would conclude on
Yeah.
physical development.
100%. That's a great message. One of the questions also: what are some differences? Sorry, what are some differences you see in the training from province to province?
I would say that the difference is not that much into the training, to be honest. I think knowledgeable coaches, coaches that are passionate, you find them all over Canada. So to be honest, there's no a good coach is a good coach. Whoever is from a coach that has less experience is the same thing. I would say the difference is more in the competitive aspect. It's more on the access of tournaments by age, the volume of kids by province. I think that makes a difference. The number of kids in Quebec and Ontario competing versus perhaps someone in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, they don't have the same volume of kids, so it affects and impacts the competitive aspect of it. So I would say that will be more about that. And after that, it's a matter of you talked about it in the beginning, philosophy. It talked about the aspect of values, and again, that travels around the country and around the world.
Yeah. Okay, Severine, listen, it's been a blast. I can't believe we were talking for more than an hour because, it feels like we just started, and I can keep going and going. But I know you have very busy schedules, so I'm going to let you go. But listen,
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming. You brought a ton of value to everybody listen, and I learned a lot myself today. So
Thank
thank
you,
you so much.
Bogdan, and great success to you and your podcast.